Hi, Mark here from the Tangent-Bound Podcast Network and host of the flagship show, the Tangent-Bound Podcast. Did you know that we over at Tangent-Bound are always looking for amazing podcasts to promote? And did you also know that we are also proud nerds and geeks of everything from movies, music, gaming, TV shows, and comic books to wrestling, MMA, soccer, and football? Whatever you can nerd or geek out about, we've got it. And if you're interested, we can help you find it. And if you're a show looking for a place to call home, we've got you covered. Side effects may include upset stomach, dizziness, tumors, shakes, and in some rare cases, death from excessive laughter. Though to be fair, it's only sometimes. Other side effects may include diarrhea, gallstones, heart palpitations, and strong desire for cookies on the dark side. Talk to your doctor and visit TangentBoundNetwork.com and see if Tangent-Bound Network is right for you.
We're not doctors, therapists, trained professionals of any kind, so if you feel you do need help, please reach out and get the help you need. We have a whole list of things on our files page over on Facebook at facebook.com/crazylifepodcast, and or just search on the internet for the suicide prevention hotline number, or go to NAMI.org or whatever resource you can find. But just please reach out for help if you need it. If you feel as though you're going to harm yourself or others, definitely reach out. And try not to be alone. Also, if you feel that way and you realize that you're writing a note or making plans of how you would do, like harm yourself or others, definitely reach out. That's a huge red flag. And lastly, please do not replace the idea of therapy with listening to this show. Again, if you need help, please reach out and get the help that you need, or contact us. We can try to help you find the help that you need.
Life sucks to the last drop. Are you gonna blow your head off? Take good aim and don't forget to duck. Life sucks every Monday and all the way to Sunday, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't care how you're doing, what's up or how's it hanging. I'd like to buy this world one last drink. Life sucks all of the time, stick it up your sunshine, and then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day.
Welcome to the Crazy Life, everybody. I am Brian, and joining me as usual is Heno.
Question?
Yeah. And
Maybe?
Jen was supposed to be here tonight, but apparently...
Yeah, she rescheduled this whole thing, too.
I know, right? We cleared our schedules just for her.
Yes. Just for her.
Because I had anything else going on.
She is nighty-night right now somewhere.
Yeah, at least that's, I hope, is the case.
We're assuming.
So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You know what? We're hoping that is the case.
Yeah, right.
It is not something more serious.
Right. I don't think it is for any reason, but, just want to make it just in case it happens to be, so we don't look like complete jerks.
Yes, exactly. Disclaimer.
Yeah. But, so...
yeah, here we are.
We're back. Yeah, thanks to everyone who's, checking us out. If it's your first time, welcome. If you're a return listener, thank you. And also, welcome, I guess. On this show, we talk about current events. No, we talk about mental health and wellness and just the journey through life.
Wow, that's almost like an official intro.
Yeah, I know.
We've never had an official intro.
Yep.
We try it every once in a while.
We just try to protect a child from, galactic threats.
Yeah.
Yep. Totally never been done before.
Never, exactly. We're so special and unique.
Yep. Yeah. Oh man. So who goes first then? What do we do?
I got a big one for you.
Okay.
Canceled the vacation.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. What made you finally pull or not finally, but what made you pull the trigger?
It was I'd been struggling with it for a while.
Yeah.
And I'd really been talking to, I talked to Neil one day for a while about it, just because it didn't feel right to me, even though there's like legally nothing preventing us from going.
Yeah.
But I was like, I just kept like, there is some nurse out there that's watching people die for 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
Who deserves to be on a beach somewhere for a while.
You are not wrong about that. Yeah.
They're the ones that are going on TV right now saying, please don't travel.
Yeah.
And there's a kid out there who doesn't have a parent right now. Like, I brought that up last week, and it was just, that was part of it too, is, there's a lot of people going. I can justify it all I want.
Right.
I can look at caseload here, caseload in Jamaica. Yeah. They're actually very low. The amount of people I'm going to see, all that stuff. But Sharon came in on Saturday and just said, I don't feel good about this. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because she really, really likes to get out of the valley. And she she works more than 2 jobs, but like right now she's busting her booty on her client that she has. There's been a lot of shipping and things going on, and so it's constantly checking mailboxes and all this. Like last week we were talking about, she had all these packages that were going to go to the advocates for those kids from that tree, and waiting for those to come, and it's been stressful on her. So we had a very honest discussion that didn't necessarily lead anywhere, but at least it was out in the open. And then here's where it was interesting is she was either, I don't know what deck of cards she grabbed, it's like a tarot deck or something, There's angels cards, there's a whole bunch of different ones. I don't know which one she grabbed, but she did a little ceremony and got a result and never told me about it.
Okay.
And so I was at work on Sunday, and I said, and so she called. And she said, well, I did the card reading. And I'm like, well, what'd you get? She said, I drew a card that says, travel is exciting, or, travel right now isn't, so it was basically something about, it was very positive about travel, and that it's an exciting time to travel right now. And she said, well, that wasn't the message I wanted. And I wasn't going to tell you. And I'm like, well, that was the message.
Yeah. Right.
The fact that you got something that you weren't going to tell me because I said, that's the message. Is ordinarily we would say, yay, exciting, travel.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, it's not yay, exciting, travel.
Yeah.
And so then when I got back on Sunday night, we sat down and talked again, and pros, cons, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I was just like, I'm going to have anxiety until we get there. And not because of it, and it has nothing to do with the travel itself. It just has to do with the fact that I feel like I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And that I've tried to hold myself to a certain standard in my life over the last, basically since I got sober, which is to listen and to be respectful of others and to, more than, talk the talk. Don't just talk the talk, walk the walk.
Right.
If I believe in something, then be consistent with it and not look for loopholes. That was what kept me from getting into recovery, was looking for all the loopholes of why I wasn't an alcoholic.
Yeah,
right.
Right. So, same with me in depression. Same reason I didn't want to go to, get on medicine or go to therapy. I was looking for the loopholes.
Yeah. And so honesty and honest with myself and about my feelings. And the fact of the matter is it felt wrong to me. It felt wrong to travel.
Yeah.
So what was great was everything was super easy to cancel except the the resort itself, because we'd already done the change from October till now, and it went out of my travel agent's hands to the resort's hands, and now she has to deal with the resort to make the change for me. It's no longer in her hands. But so we, and then our schedules are just really wacky, and I wasn't going to wait until October. I said, let's just go with May. It'll be at the tail end of the winter.
Yeah.
And at the very, at least numbers will go down by that point. Conditions aren't going to be any better, at that point, really.
Right.
But the main thing is traveling in the first week of January after what we're going to have another surge, a post-Christmas surge. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah.
And also Sharon does have a lot of stuff that goes on in January, and she's like, I just feel better that we're not going in January.
Yeah, that's understandable. Yeah.
Yeah. So it immediately when we made the decision, it felt good. Right away, it just felt better.
I think that's one of those times too that you're kind of like, okay, that was probably the move. As soon as you make a decision and you're like, I feel amazing, so much better now. It's like, okay, that's probably, that's one of those times where your body's telling you something, and I said last week when we were talking about it, it was like, you easily could have justified it either way. Whether you said we're going or we're not, you could have come up with easily enough to support your decision. And it'd be hard to, you could argue it, but also it'd be hard to really find flaw in it, even though, like you were saying, the travel and stuff, is risky or whatever it is and all this, but it's still, like you were saying, but it's a low area. It's this, you can kind of find a counter to most of the cons.
So yeah, there's always a justification for everything, and there's something to compare it to always. Like, oh, well, this is no different than this, and I do this all the time, or all that kind of stuff. But the reality is about how something feels, and if it either feels right or or it feels wrong, and this did feel wrong.
Yeah.
And one of the things that one of the benefits that I get from living my life in a different way is my intuition tends to be, I have more confidence in my intuition. It doesn't fool me as much as it used to.
Yeah.
Because I don't lie to myself as much.
Right.
And so therefore, usually if something seems off, it's worth paying attention to, because there's a reason for it. Because when my experience is that the more we make the right decisions in life, the more it tunes us to, that it becomes, well, it's just like anything. It becomes a practice.
Yeah.
And we get better at it, and we start to listen to ourselves. And that's that part of that honesty. It's like old Heno didn't listen to the messages that were there, didn't listen to, it's like there was, I could block anybody out if I wanted to. I could compartmentalize. I could, in order to hide bad behavior of all different kinds, that's also a practice. And as you practice to get away from it, there's a benefit I found. And that is, there's also the side where it's like, oh, why can't I just be a liar right now and lie to myself? It's like, well, I can't anymore. And I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I have that. So the best part, was talking to Neil about it yesterday. And he said, like I told him, I said, no one was going to outright say you shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
But everyone's going to say, I'm glad you're not doing it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's funny going, kind of piggybacking off this a little bit. My mom, she has a recipe that was her dad's for fruitcake. And her and my sister wanted to get together and make it, And my sister really wanted to do it, and my mom was kind of back and forth about it. Like, I know I shouldn't and all this, but you could tell the whole time it's like she wants to so bad. Yeah. And my mom, as far as I can think, has not been in a store or a restaurant since quarantine began.
Oh, wow.
So she has really tried hard to, stay away from things. And I told her, I said, look, I said, I know my sister is going to basically clean her house top to bottom before my mom goes over there. I was like, if you need to feel comfortable, wear a mask while you're there, wear gloves, whatever you need to do to feel comfortable. Make sure you have, hand sanitizer, or better yet, wash your hands while you're there, just whatever. I said, if you go, I said, but in the end, it's your decision. I'm not gonna push you either way. And she ended up going, and she had an amazing time. It was her, my sister, and my great nephew. And I'm only saying it that way in case someone listening knows me, so it's a little more like, so they know who I'm talking about. Anyway, but they had an amazing time. They laughed a bunch. They had, all this. So I'm glad she went. And it's like, even with the risks and stuff, it's like, I'm still glad she went because she needed that. And there is that element to it too. We've talked on here before about, finding some normalcy in your life and stuff. And it's like, she has literally stripped everything away during this time. Like I said, she doesn't go in anywhere, basically, kind of a thing. She's not hanging out with people. She's not, so it's like, and I told her, I said, but I wasn't going to influence you. I said, I wanted you to make that decision. That way, if, God forbid something happened, it doesn't look like I shoved her into a decision where it's like, hey, she was an adult. She made her own mind up, kind of a thing. But like I said, I was also very afterwards. I was like, I'm glad she went and did it because she deserved it and she needed that. But it was that's probably the only thing she'll do. Like she won't do anything else for whatever. And my sister did. She told my mom the night and day before. She literally cleaned everything, wiped everything she could down, the high contact areas and stuff, especially, and all that stuff. And, they had gloves and all that kind of stuff there. It's the best they could do, and that's all any of us can do. But it sucks when, cause we're not doing a family gathering, so that's not happening or anything. So like I said, I knew this was going to basically be the only thing she might do for a long time, so it was kind of like, but even then it's like, she felt like she even said kind of like, remember a while ago when I was like, we were at a, outside at a bar and I was like, I still feel like I'm getting away with something. Like, I feel like I'm doing something wrong here, and she had the same feeling because it's, she's like, I know we're not supposed to. And I was like, yeah, but, again, if you assess the risk in the situation, it was probably low. Yeah, there was a chance of something, but, it's, and the other side of it is, even if she did get infected, she would come back here and she's not going out all the time. So she's not going to go spread it to a ton of people. I mean, I might, because, if it got around me, I could carry it, but, it's, thank goodness everything seems fine. That was, plenty of days ago. Nobody's had any sort of, scares or anything since. So it's, but it's one of those where she was going through the same thing. And I think once she made her decision and once she got over there and was having fun and stuff, it was kind of like, this is where I'm supposed to be right now. Even if it seems wrong, it is really where I'm supposed to be right now, making those memories with, my great nephew and stuff. So, it's tough. It's really tough because I'm such an advocate for erring, even if it's on the side of extreme caution. I'm more for that, but also it's like, look, I mean, hell, I go out to, when I do, every time I go out, it's a risk, whether it's for groceries or whatever it's for, it's a risk. So, it's, and even, I've heard plenty of stories too, of people doing everything humanly possible and they still, end up with it. So it is such a rough situation to go through for all of us, but, just hope everyone's as safe as you can be, but also, I hope people can get some of the things that they deserve in a way that, like you're like, or really cherish each year, without giant gatherings. That's one where I'm like, no on the giant gatherings.
That's the thing is that's it is. And I don't think there's any, I don't feel any, I deserve this or I need this. That's irrelevant. We have certain guidelines and we can follow them or we don't.
Yeah.
And for the most part, a one-on-one within your family, that's no one's sitting there saying don't do that.
Yeah.
It comes down to personal stuff, which is like, okay, I'm at risk and I'm taking a chance here. It's like you said, any other, every time that you leave the house and go somewhere, you're a threat to your mother.
Yep.
That's a fact.
It is. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so it's like just put things into perspective and I think that's the best we can do. And that was, I think, part of for me, the decision was about that perspective of where do I fit in the, all right. So the CDC says something about, or I'm sorry, the State Department says don't travel to Jamaica because of high risk for COVID. And I look at their numbers and I'm like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
We're like, it's the same message they had from October. The numbers are still the same. We've quadrupled.
Yeah, I was going to say you're more of a risk going there.
That's
it.
That's it. Yeah. I was like, I'm the virus.
Yeah, you're the risk. Yeah.
Yeah. That was the part about it. Is like, wait a minute here. And just look.
And I understand though, because literally part of it too is like literally anyone that's on that plane with you could be bringing it, so but again, it's like you're saying, it's like by statistics, you're more likely to take it to them than they are to give it to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was really felt good. I had Jax had a little bump on his. Well, he's got bumpies all over. They're just like little fatty deposits, but he had one that just looks like it grew really fast, and he was licking it a lot, and it was probably red because he's licking it a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm like, let's just go get it checked out. It was something I already knew I was going to have to deal with. Like, eventually the little bumps get too big and the clippers get him when he goes to grooming.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I'm like, and I have to get his teeth cleaned. He has to get put under for that. And so, like, the last time they cleaned his teeth, they just cut a few of these things out. But so I just took him in on Monday. They just did a quick look under the microscope. They're like, okay, it's not a mast cell, which is it's a fast growing and, that's the one that they don't want to see. And so it wasn't that. So I'm like, okay, it's not a mast cell, but we're going to get rid of it anyway because he's obviously paying attention to it.
Yeah,
so,
it's bugging him. Right.
Yeah. And so it's great. So I got, the time. I have got the time off right now that I can take because of the holidays are landing on my days off. So I was going to get a 3-day weekend next week. Okay, I'm going to take Wednesday instead of Thursday. Fine.
Yeah.
But it's been great. I've had a great time at work. I love being at work before Christmas because we do have a lot of people coming in. There's just it just feels right. And I love putting the Christmas hat on and, a different one every day. And I post it and it just really feels fun.
Yeah.
I got my staff employee review tomorrow and
real quick, the hat thing too is cool because it's something you can do. Even with what's going on, it's one of your. It's like a tradition you don't have to worry about. Yeah, so it's cool that it's something like that, and people enjoy looking at them. I enjoy looking at them, even though I've seen some of the ones you've posted before, but it's still always like, oh yeah, it is that time of year,
Yeah.
So
I get nice. I'll usually throw in a new one. Like today's was a new one. That was fun, and then like tomorrow's my employee evaluation, and it's weird. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that is.
I know what's going to be there. There's nothing. If anything, the thing that I won't be expecting will be being asked to do more or something.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not it's not that I need to pick up my game. It's no, we'd like you to do more. Okay, I'll do more. And it feels good to be in that place right now, and just to feel good about what's going on at my work is so refreshing, and to feel useful and stuff. For me, it's a great way to go into taking days off.
Mm-hmm.
Us not being there, it feels better when everything is, when things are uncomfortable in a work situation.
Yeah.
And, when you got a few extra days off, that's time for,
Yeah.
stuff to go on in your brain.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be going on in the brain.
It's interesting because it can work kind of flip of that too, which is in the past where I've had to work the very next day or late that the rest of my shift, even after getting an evaluation where, maybe I got passed over for a promotion or something to that effect. And I'm angry the rest of the time, and I'm not at the top of my game. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I started asking, like, when it was an evaluation time, I'd be like, hey, do me a favor, do my evaluation the day before I have a day or two off. That way, if I don't like what I see, I can cool off, calm head, and come back in and go back at my job. Because otherwise, if you put me in a foul mood, I'm going to hold that foul mood for a while, probably. Like I'm just going to ruminate over it the whole shift. Tell me, I'll show you, kind of.
So true.
And that's just knowing me, But that was also back when I didn't deal with my temper as well as I do now. I was a whole lot worse back then than I used to be. So, yeah.
Yes, that's about what I've got going on. How about you?
Well, I had a situation where it was amazing how fast I diffused myself, and I was red hot.
Ooh.
I had called in groceries, and when we get there, they usually text me with a link that, hey, when you get here, click the link, put in the parking spot, and we'll be right out. Well, I get there, and I hadn't gotten that text, and I'm like, whatever. So I call the number on the sign, and it's like, we don't have an order for that phone number. And I'm like, so I pull up my email real quick, and I'm like, okay, well, it shows, make sure I had it scheduled for that day, because sometimes I schedule it late at night, and I've done that once before where I've forgotten technically it's this day now, so then it'll schedule you for one, kind of thing. And I was like, no, I'm supposed to be here. It's between 3 and 4, like I scheduled it. And I look, and I called, and a woman who worked there, she was out getting groceries to someone else, and she asked for my name. She goes inside. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to call again because she's going to take care of it. It was like 15, 20 minutes later, and I'm like, she's come out for 2 other cars. So I call the number again and get somebody, and they were like, oh, yeah, they're like, we don't have a delivery for you. And I'm like, well, you should, because we were billed for it, because I looked at my bank account. And they go, oh, they're like, you didn't get a text or anything? They're like, we canceled your order this morning. And I'm like,
whoa.
I'm like, what? I'm like, no, I didn't. I'm like, normally I get texts from you guys of like, through the day, I'd be like, don't forget to pick up your order. Hey, when you get here, do this, And I'm like, I didn't get anything. So, and the girl was like, well, she's like, hold on. She's like, I can go ahead and she goes, yeah, she's like, we're really short staffed today. And she goes, well, let me see if I can put it through now. And maybe, if you could come back in like an hour or something. And I'm like, okay. I live like 5 minutes from the store, so it's really no big deal, right? Okay, fine. So then I hear some guy say something to her, and then she's like, oh, actually, we're not allowed to do any more pulls for tonight because we're short-staffed. And I'm like, really? And I'm like, well, can you put my order to where like it gets priority for tomorrow, kind of a thing? And she's like, no, you have to resubmit it for that, kind of a thing. And I'm like, so what you're telling me is I'm not going to get any sort of prioritization when you canceled my order today. I feel like I should go to the top of the list for tomorrow. Like whatever time I pick, I feel like I should bump someone, basically. And I'm not trying to pull a, do you know who I am? But I kind of am, because I feel like I've been wronged, right?
Yeah.
And she goes, no, we can't do that. And I'm like, okay. And I hang up the phone, and I threw my phone at the floor of the car. And then I picked it up, and I'm like, I'm going in, and I'm just boom. I mean, I might as well, you probably could have seen a flame off my head.
and I went inside with a purpose, like I actively saw people. I had a mask on and people were getting out of my way. Like, so I must have really looked pissed. And
whoa.
I get in there and I'm standing in line for the customer service and I'm so mad. And I'm going through because I'm going to pull up my email where it shows the confirmation and whatnot. And when I did, my phone refreshes its email, and then there's an email from them saying that my order had been canceled and it was in the morning. And I'm like, okay, and I'm still mad, but then I'm like, I can't go yell at somebody now. Because they did send something. My phone just for some reason didn't update the email and it didn't go through. So I was like, well, I can't actively be mad. And because I was just gonna, there was this poor kid who was gonna, catch the brunt of it. Well, not really, because I would have been like, I want to talk to a manager, but what was funny, though, was, like we've talked in times where sometimes you're supposed to be in a certain spot, right? So while I'm standing there, I'm blocking like they have the scratch-off lottery ticket machine, I'm standing in front of this because that's just where it is, that's where the line was. And a guy asked, he said, excuse me, can I get to the, yeah, no problem, so I move well out of the way, 6 feet, and while he's doing that, we're kind of like, make sure you get winners and all that kind of stuff. And the guy in front of me turns around and he starts telling me about how like 2 days before, his work has some sort of like I don't know what it is. It's some sort of work pool or something that they do every week, and one person wins and they get a few bucks, right? Well, or no, they had done scratch offs. That's what it was. And he said he never buys into them because he never bothers. But he said, he said he was low on money, so he just handed him $2 and said, "Get me one." They got him one. He won like $200 or something like that. And I'm like, awesome. And he goes, "You don't even know, man." He's like, "My hours got cut last week," and he's like, "And I was about $200 down on my paycheck." He's like, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills that are due right now. And I'm like, oh man. And he goes, yeah. And all this. And I was just like, boy, I was like, it's amazing how the world provides sometimes, like sometimes things just fall right into your lap. And he goes, you ain't kidding. He's like, I was seriously like, well, I guess I'm going to be eating ramen or something this week, and whatever you got to do. And I'm like, yeah, that's the truth. But we just were standing there, and then we just kind of were shooting the breeze. And this was before I realized that I wasn't going to stand in this line anymore, obviously. But, and while I'm standing there and stuff and talking with him, I was, we were kind of laughing, and I was like, man, that's a great story. I love hearing that kind of stuff that, somebody who really needed to hit a winner on a lottery ticket hit one, and even though it wasn't like millions, it was still like, hey, that changed his life for that week. $200 made a big difference for the guy. And, and then when I saw the other and I walked away and I got about halfway to the back of the store, and I was like, man, I'm pretty well diffused. Like,
that's great.
That guy was there to diffuse me. And I needed to be right there, even though I was super mad going in. I needed to be right there because I needed to be calmed down. Because if I had walked around the store, or if I had been the first in line, I would have snapped before I realized I got that email.
Wow.
Kind of a thing. So it's just one of those times where, whether a person believes in coincidence or any of this stuff, who knows? But when you look back, you just kind of are like, okay, universe, I see you, all right. And I did. I walked around the rest of the store. I had like 2 things I was, to get or whatever. And I, picked up my prescription but it was funny though, cause I got over to the pharmacy, and while I'm standing there, at the thing, there was a guy who, I don't know how to word it, but, he has issues with his voice modulation. Like when he talked, his voice would get really loud and then really quiet, really loud and really quiet. So, and he, I don't know how to word. He seemed a little slow. Okay. But he, when he got done with all his stuff, he, looked at the pharmacy tech and, and said, Merry Christmas. And she said Merry Christmas back to him. He turned around, had a smile on his face. She had a smile on her face. And no harm, no foul. The next woman that walks up goes, I'm surprised you're allowed to say Merry Christmas.
Oh,
and
God.
Whoom, there went the smile. And then I had another, you're right where you need to be moment. And then I remembered that anger that I was like, boy, I was about to misplace this. This is where my anger belongs. And I went off on that woman because she stole a smile from the other person. I said, I looked at her and I said, you should be ashamed of yourself. And she just looked at me and I'm like, you walked up here and she was smiling. That guy put a smile on her face. There was nothing harmful about what happened there. You walked up and just because you think you're righteous, you stole her smile. Wow. You put her in you took that away from her. And I was like, and I just looked at her, I'm like, what gives you that right? And I just,
wow.
Yeah. So maybe not the nicest thing I could have done, but I'm not going to lie. I felt no guilt about it because it's one of the worst things you can take from somebody. She had a nice moment. Working retail sucks through Christmas. It doesn't matter what part of retail you work. It's awful, and she didn't have to word it that way or be that way, but her attitude and the way she worded that did it just chap my hind parts, and that was it. And like I said, and I was like, oh yeah, I still have a fireball in my pocket. I guess I should do something with it. So, yeah. Like I said, maybe not the best thing I could have done, but also I was just like, I don't even care. And it wasn't like a white knight situation. It was simply like, you're just being a jerk to somebody.
That was her. She chose.
Yeah, you chose to do that. Exactly.
That was a choice. It's an absolute, thought out choice.
Yep.
It's funny. We can apply that. Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said right now? Does it need to be said right now by me to your part?
Yeah.
But she was the one that needed to ask those screwy questions.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I said, even looking at it now, yes is the answer to all of those questions for me. Yeah. I still feel like it needed to be said to her because she's that kind of person going to walk around. And I'm sorry, but just because you think you're righteous doesn't give you a right to be a jerk.
Well, it's like, is it helpful? No.
Yeah.
Is it necessary? No. Is it kind? No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe, and for your part, was it necessary? Was it helpful? Well, we'll never know. But maybe she did, But wouldn't it be nice to know that maybe she realized that she did take the smile from somebody's face?
Yeah. Well, do you know what I think it was, honestly? I think what happened was from those years of me running shifts, whenever somebody would come at one of my employees, I would basically stand between the employee and the customer and be like, you're talking to me now. And I think I inadvertently did it. So it was like white knight, but it wasn't for that purpose. It was just more of I saw someone wronged and I'm not going to tolerate it. I'm sick of us as a people, as a society, just letting people get away with this kind of behavior. What gives her the right to do that? She could have worded that so differently.
She could have just kept her mouth shut.
Or that, yeah. Yeah.
I just don't get that.
Yep.
I don't get I don't get that anymore. I used to understand it, but now I don't. Just the idea of why be purposely just a big bum out?
Well, and like I said, especially as you're approaching the counter, the girl's got, she's got a big smile on her face. Like, how many people do you know that complain about, these people at the customer service, they're all rude and they're, and it's like, you just had an opportunity to actually see a great moment where someone was a natural smile and then you just
part of it.
Yeah. And you might as well have just walked up to here and be like, what are you smiling about?
No kidding. true.
I was like,
Absolutely
oh.
true. Huh.
And that was the thing. I didn't stick around. I wasn't going to wait for anyone to say thank you or any of that because I didn't do it for those reasons. I did it because it bugged me. And if you say it in public, I'm not one of those though. Oh, I wasn't talking to you. Be like, you said it in public, buddy. You're talking to me.
Yeah.
So
I like your story about having this conversation with the guy who's just in a good mood in the right place and is like full of gratitude and how it can like take you out of yourself for a while.
Yeah.
And out of your own self, because that's what it comes down to. Like everything that I did. Oh, that was the other thing I did last week. I made an apology for I did something I didn't need to do publicly.
Okay.
Right. The weird feeling I got, that I talked about last week about the whole contest and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I said, and I did it publicly, and that was not necessary.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I apologized for that. And that felt really good because coming back to that, no matter what, all that had to do with me is if I'm in one of those places like you were at, it's usually self-centered.
Yeah.
It's completely motivated by me not getting what I want or losing something that I already.
Yeah.
It's
really quick,
behavior.
I do want to also point out for anyone who's not a long-time listener, my situation with my grocery store, this is about the fourth time where something kind of major has happened. Yeah. My tolerance is very thin for them.
It's not a track record.
Yeah. But again, this one was on my, I hate to, it wasn't my fault. This one was on my phone.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting? Again, that reminder of just sometimes all we need to do is pause.
Right. And that's the thing. I didn't still go through and complain. I still could have complained,
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not going to. I was like, it was kind of more of like, how it is. Like, and we've all been there where you just go up to someone else and you just go off half cocked on them. And then you realize while you're talking, oh, wait, I did that.
That comes back to the reading I shared last week. It's like it's my choice what reality I want to exist in.
Yeah.
Do I want to exist in this bitter attitude full of recrimination and resentment, or do I want to just chalk it up to, well, it's another one of those things. On to the next thing that'll hopefully be better, like a great conversation. And I think it really comes down to that. It's that we use the old hill to die on reference all the time. And, sometimes it's worth looking at. It is like, is this really the hill to die on?
Right. Yeah. I like I said, I think my situation with the second person goes back to, I'm sure, like you remember, it's been a month or two or a few months ago when I was like, I'm tired of listening to people spread disinformation. I'm tired of listening to bigots. I'm done with it. And I will say stuff to people now. I said something to somebody in the post office because they were spreading disinformation about COVID. And, and when she said it, I was like, that is not true. That is not true. And I told her, I said, it has, I said, please go look that up. I said, that is not true. And when, cause it was a woman was basically, she was kind of positioning it to where COVID would only really hurt you or kill you if you have a pre-existing condition, which has been proven over and over and over again. That is not true. There are plenty of perfectly, air quote, healthy people who've gotten it or are now dead. So, I told her, I said, don't take that as don't use that as a loophole / safety blanket. Oh, well, I don't have any pre-existing. So, not to mention when she was kind of saying it, I'm looking at her going, lady, you're 70. That's a pre-existing condition. You may not realize it, but it's like pre-existing conditions for this can be a large realm of things. I learned at my doctor's office, and I didn't know that they even are they kind of mentioned it to me about having the dermatitis that I have because it's in the eczema type family, and they're like, that's an immunodeficiency, and I was like, oh yeah, you're not wrong. It's not major immunodeficiency, but it's still something to keep an eye on. It's like, thank you. I needed something else to worry about. No, but anyway, all that aside, it's been pretty decent. I've been just trying to get things done and kind of looking inward a little bit with like we talked last week about clutter and stuff. And actually I read an article today about how the quarantine made the person look inward to their possessions and basically go, I need to get rid of some stuff. And I've heard quite a few people that have cleaned out their closets, have finally donated clothes that they've been meaning to donate for years or whatever, or whatever. And it's like, I've heard more and more of this. So it's one of those where I think as much as this year has sucked, I really think there are some things that people are going to be able to look at and really go, there were moments of that. Yes, overall it stinks, but it did force us in some ways to maybe find some perspective on some stuff like you and I talked about last week. So I'm not going to go back into that. If you want to hear that, go back and listen to last week's episode if you haven't already. So, So that's been about it for me. It's been, pretty quiet. We're not doing anything special for Christmas. We are going to just pick up, a dinner and everything just so it's easy. This year we're not going to bother, kind of like we did for Thanksgiving. Just super easy. Get some grub and enjoy.
Yeah, so I'm kind of glad I got the day off on Thursday. It'll allow me to go in the middle of the day and go get something for, at least for a dinner for breakfast the next day. And I don't have to work usually I'm the one that works on Christmas Day, and I don't have to this year. So
that's got to be different.
I just need to be on call.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah. I always volunteered because it was double time. I was always like, you can work me all day.
You're like, I'm good.
Well, I was working, back, this is years ago too, but, I was making like $12 an hour. So double time. It's like, you're paying me $24 an hour to work a video store? Okay.
Yeah. Now we're talking some real money here.
Yeah. Okay. I'll work all day. I don't care. Just give me some time for lunch and a couple breaks to, just maybe get off my feet for a few minutes. I'm good. So yeah, that was, I know a lot of people used to give me guff about that, though. Yeah, but your family. I'm like, they can understand I'm making $24 an hour.
An hour, yeah, exactly.
Like, I'll see them as soon as I can, but, just save me a plate, basically. Yeah. Or better yet, bring me a plate.
Even better.
Yeah, that was actually something that was kind of interesting about working on Christmas Day at a video store. People would bring us food and cookies. Like, there was one woman, she came in right at open. And she's like, I didn't know if you guys were open or not. She's like, she was going from one place to another and saw we were open and then came in. And then she came back like an hour later and she had like a quiche for us.
Huh.
And it was really good, and then, somebody later on in the day brought in some Christmas cookies and stuff. I was like, this is awesome,
Nice.
Yeah. Made a boring day better because you're busy for a short time, then you're dead for a long time, then you're busy again, and then dead. So kind of like New Year's, you're busy up until about 8:00, then you're twiddling your thumbs for the next 4 hours. So anyway, our topic for this week is I saw this earlier today. I thought it was a really interesting flip on depression, and the title of it is "We've Got Depression All Wrong. It's Trying to Save Us." It says new theories recognize depression as part of biological survival strategy. I'm trying to think if I want to read this whole thing here, if I want to just kind of skip down. It is a lot, yeah. Maybe we can kind of just talk about the concepts here a little. Well, a part of it I kind of have to read here, so I guess. But
yeah.
It says biological anthropologists have argued that depression is an adaptive response to adversity and not a mental disorder. In October, the British Psychological Society published a new report on depression stating that, quote, depression is best thought of as an experience or set of experiences rather than a disease, end quote. And neurologists are focusing on the role of the autonomic nervous system in depression. According to the I looked up how to say this earlier. I believe it's polyvagal theory of the ANS. Depression is part of a biological defense strategy meant to help us survive. And it says the common wisdom is that depression starts in the mind with distorted thinking, which we've talked about at great length. That leads to psychosomatic symptoms like headaches, stomach aches, or fatigue. Now, models like the polyvagal theory suggest that we've got it backward. It's the body that detects danger and initiates a defense strategy meant to help us survive. That biological strategy is called immobilization, and it manifests in the mind and body with a set of symptoms we call depression. Sorry. And I really like this next part where there's a line that basically says that, well, it says, I'll just read it anyway. I was going to skip, and I was like, when we think of depression as irrational and unnecessary suffering, we stigmatize people and rob them of hope. But when we begin to understand that depression, at least initially, happens for a good reason, we lift that shame. People with depression are courageous survivors, not damaged invalids. And it gives an example here, which is a really dark example, but
yeah.
Says Laura believes that depression saved her life. Most of the time, her father only hurt her with words. But it was when she stood up to him that Laura's dad got dangerous. That's when he'd get that vicious look in his eyes. More than once, his violence had put Laura's life at risk. Laura's father was so perceptive that he could tell when she felt rebellious on the inside, even when she was hiding it, and he punished her for those feelings. It was depression that helped Laura survive. Depression kept her head down, kept her from resisting, helped her accept the unacceptable. Depression numbed her rebellious feelings. And Laura grew up at a time where there was no one to tell, nowhere for her to get help outside of her home. Her only strategy was to survive in place, and she did. Looking back, Laura does not regret her childhood depression. She values it. Going through her own healing process and working with her therapist helped her see how depression served her. Laura's story is stark, it's ugly, and it helps us understand that even though depression may happen for a good reason, that does not make it a good thing. Laura suffered deeply and describes the pain of her hopelessness vividly. Her depression was a bad experience that started as the last resort of a good biological system. I want to stop right there for a minute because I don't like the example that they gave, because unless Laura grew up a very, very, very long time ago, there's been some help, and I don't want to diminish the work that people have done to help people over the years, but also the end part of it is more of what I appreciate, which is that even though depression might help you survive a situation by like that, where it'll help you keep your head down and whatnot, but also to keep the emphasis on that it's not a good thing, that even though it worked, and it, I remember when I used to play Magic, the Gathering, there would be a lot of arguments over strategy, right? And be like, well, yeah, but I won. And it's like, yeah, but 9 times out of 10, that isn't going to work. So it's bad strategy. But like, yeah, but I won. And it's like, and people would just run in a circle with this, Mm-hmm. And so just because something works doesn't mean that it's a good strategy. Again, when you, like Henno, the way he dealt with his pain and different stuff for a long time was booze. Not a good, it worked.
Yeah, it worked, but
not a good strategy. Me with depression, not a good strategy. But so it's still something that, even though it may work and it may get you through something, it is something that you still should be, try and make sure that you're, again, it points out talking with a therapist to help process those traumas and whatnot. So even if you do this, you may then have to go to a therapist and unpack because depression basically at that point will help you just kind of pack it in, bury it. So be careful with that.
So like the example they bring in the article on a physiological standpoint of the rabbit in the the fox's mouth or coyote or whatever it is, and that the rabbit just goes completely limp.
Yeah.
And basically like the rabbit just gives up, and it's a protective mechanism in that the rabbit's a goner, and so why experience the trauma?
Right.
And I thought that was a great example. the one of like reptiles that they do the freeze, and I've had reptiles and I've seen it before, and it's just like it's a physiological reaction. But I think the rabbits is even more important in that it's more than just it's literally disconnecting from the situation completely.
Yeah.
And that by understanding that there's a physiological thing going on here that is part of being a human being, now make at least get away of that internal dialogue and also external dialogue of what's wrong with you.
Yes. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with me.
Right.
I'm just reacting as a human being. Now, it might be that I react a little more severely than other people. And this is where I can relate to this. And it's the idea of when it was pointed out that alcoholism is like an allergy. And all of a sudden it made sense to me because I have allergies. Mm-hmm. And I've mentioned this here before. When I was a kid, wanted to go to the party. I want to, eat the ice cream like all the other kids are eating the ice cream. But then afterwards, I got a grumbly tummy. I don't feel so good.
Yeah.
And there's negative effects. And I say, no, all right, I can't eat the ice cream again. But then I go to the party and everyone else is drinking, right? And all of a sudden It's like, wow, that feels just like going to the bar and everyone else is drinking and everyone else is having a good time.
Yeah.
And the next morning I wake up and I'm like, oh boy, that was a bad idea. But then, and so all of a sudden I could relate to something, and it gave me a physiological way of looking at it that erased some of the stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, okay, in me, alcohol has an effect that it doesn't affect other people.
Yeah.
Like I get this craving.
Mm-hmm.
And that craving starts with the first drink, and that's part of the allergy.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I really like this article, because I think it could do a lot of good towards I found it easier to accept what was going on with me and therefore find recovery from it.
Yeah.
When I could just say, when it wasn't about what's wrong with me, why can't I be like everyone else? Well, I can't be.
Yeah.
Because I'm not like everyone else in this regard. Now, I'm like a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of alcoholics out there.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of people who are not textbook, air quote, alcoholics that do a lot of things alcoholics do, but they can still stop or walk away or whatever as well, too. Because there's been plenty of times in my life where I've absolutely self-medicated, that's how I dealt with my depression for a long time, was I just kept drinking. But I also was able to stop, like there was no craving in me. I just drank because I was like, well, this makes it go away. This is time travel.
Yeah.
I'm going to drink until I black out, and I'll wake up and be like, well, it's another day, kind of thing.
It was a bad strategy, but it wasn't permanent.
Right. So exactly. Yeah. So that's why it's like, so even though you and I are not exactly the same, I certainly can understand what was going on to some extent, because I was still doing some of the behavioral pattern of that without going full bore, and not everybody does that. There's some people, the way they numb themselves is they'll have a drink or two and then that's the end of it. I was, sitting with a friend, sitting up all night, knocking 30 packs or more away, so it was a whole different story than what most people do,
Yeah. I've shared about someone whose story I went to listen to, and she literally talked about having a glass of wine or two a night, and she identified herself as an alcoholic. And I'm like, 2 glasses? Try 2 bottles a night.
Yeah.
But when I heard her story, I heard my story.
Right.
So when she self-identifies herself as an alcoholic, I'm like, I believe you.
Yeah.
Because now, literally it was like, whoa.
It's interesting because I wonder, and this is kind of sidetracked here, but it's also kind of not. I saw something earlier talking about people suffering from situational depression. Like that dealing with everything going on this year has put a lot of people into a depressed state, right? Now, as things emerge back to socializing and working and all this, a lot of those people will probably be able to emerge rather unscathed. There will be some, of course, that have some, whatever. And I wonder if there's an element of not just alcoholism, but some sort of an addiction to where there can be a situational part of it. To where it's not like full-on addiction. Like me, as an example. I was drinking 5-6 nights a week to excess and beyond. And then eventually I hit my bottom and was like, I need to make a change here. During that time, I'm pretty sure most people would, if you really were around me, you probably might have thought I was an alcoholic. Because I was going to work drunk. I was drinking at work. I was, doing a lot of things that a lot of alcoholics I know do. So, but then I was able to eventually, and it wasn't just like one night cold turkey, but it was still, I kind of wonder if that is something that exists or not. It's something I've never talked to somebody about, but I kind of wonder.
Well, I've seen it, but I know this is just purely anecdotal, but I've seen it with so many people that I know that they've done periods of sobriety because they needed to at that time.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking 3 months, 6 months. I'm talking they went years.
Years, yeah.
And then they started drinking again, whatever, 10 years later, something, and it never affected them the same way. And I think that's what this article is touching on, and what you talked about, that people right now, we say, oh, you don't suffer from depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, right now you are suffering from depression because you're having this physiological reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not, and that's okay. Some people, if we accept this premise that this is something, we shouldn't look at it as a disease, and that we should look at it as our, that it's our bodies reacting in a way that is, from an evolutionary standpoint,
mm-hmm.
and that there's benefits from that. We can't, to me, you apply it to all cases.
Yeah.
And that, some people can just have a period of time where they need to do some sort of therapies because they are living in that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at my prime example for myself is when I bought the house. The level of anxiety I shut, now that I'm thinking about it, I shut down.
Yeah.
I absolutely shut down because I was that entire process. I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to wait until it was done.
Yeah.
I couldn't just pretend like, oh, I'm just going to go. The anxiety was such that it made me not be myself.
Right. Now, just because I don't remember, you were sober when you bought the house, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I thought you were already into your sobriety. I just wasn't. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Well into it.
Okay.
Years in.
That's what I thought.
And it's reflective of other times in my life like that. But this is right up there. Like, imagine they use an example of something, construction going on next door to you, and the rumbling causes, anxiety, and you have a physiological reaction to it.
You can see that if you have a pet, right?
Oh,
cats will react to things that make kind of like hissing noises a lot of times. Even though there's no snakes in the house, they still have a response to hissing noises sometimes, or another cat or anything like that. So it clearly is reminding them of danger. Because like my cat hears certain things and she'll get real low to the ground and her ears are down and her eyes are wide open. You can tell she's in full fight or flight,
Yep.
So that, and dogs do it too. I've seen plenty of dogs do it. So if you have a pet, you've seen it. Even if you don't recognize it in yourself or others, you've seen it in your pets, most likely.
Now the thing I would like to add to this article really doesn't talk about it, is that, all right, now we understand maybe some of the origins of this.
Yeah.
This does not prescribe or even go into the idea that there's some sort of a universal solution
Right.
as a result. No, everybody still is going to have their own solution to it. If I wasn't seeing my therapist at the time that when I shut down with that, when I was waiting for the house to finally close.
Right.
If I had, then, my therapist, I'm sure, would have used whatever she felt was the best way to get through this for me in my situation. And so just because I had that experience doesn't mean that, okay, all of a sudden I need to be prescribed, a certain therapy or, that kind of a thing. It's still an individual basis.
Right.
However, I think this at least I like the idea of like using this to erase some of the stigma.
Well, here's some, I want to read this next part of this here because I think one of the things that I really dug about this is, again, I'm not saying I 100% buy into the experiences versus like I don't know how else you want to word it, like a chemical situation or but it makes sense because if you think about it, a lot of people with depression, they can find some sort of traumas that probably, it's interesting how chronologically some things can line up. So, what this did for me is I'm one of those people that the best way for me to understand is for you to say A happens, B happens, C happens, D happens. And that's why you're the way you are kind of a thing. Or that's why whatever. Yeah. And I go, oh, okay. Like, I talked to, after getting blood work results one time with my primary care doctor, there was something, I don't remember what it was now, but I asked him something and he goes, well, do you know how that works? And I said, no. And he was like, boom, 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 and goes down how, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense to me. Now I get it,
Yeah.
And I've always been that way. And it's not that I need it like dumbed down. What I need is for you to I need the logic. When you give me that, then I go, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense. And I think this article, I understood depression. I felt like almost better reading this than when I was told why and how depression manifests.
Yeah. It was like for me when it was explained to me by my therapist that in some alcoholics, when they drink, it releases an endorphin in their brains. The minute she said it, I was like, it was like somebody just finally the light shined down.
Right?
I'm like, and it got me, and it reminds me of a story I heard about a guy that a good friend of mine dated a guy that was a world-class kayaker, and he knew 3 different ways. You know how when the kayak is upside down to right themselves?
Yeah.
He knew 3 different techniques. And so what he did is when he ran a class, he brought everyone out in the swimming pool and he went underwater and he flipped them over and he looked at what did they do naturally and he taught them the technique that was closest to their initial reaction.
That makes so much sense.
Right?
Yeah.
So why try to teach someone that you're going to use the go left twist technique when their natural instinct was to do the right side, flippity flop.
Right.
It
was like
right. And
my teacher's trying to teach me to write right-handed instead of left-handed when I was a kid. Because they're like, that's weird. It looks uncomfortable. It's like, well, it's what feels right to me. Instead of going, oh, well, here's some things that may help you as a left-hander. Instead, it was more, oh, well, I guess you're out of luck because you're lefty.
Yeah. And that's where I think these articles really can be very useful, is because for someone like you or me, they can suddenly relate to it because somebody is laid out in a way that goes, oh, okay, this is why I am the way I am.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it still comes down to one question. Well, now what?
Now what? Yeah. You're right. Well, like this says in here, like I said, I wanted to read this because I thought this was a great piece for somebody maybe who doesn't have depression, that it's something that can really maybe explain it to where maybe if you're like me mentally in that you're better with a ABC situation. It says in humans, people often describe feeling out of bodies during traumatic events. which has a defensive act of cushioning the emotional shock. This is important because some things that are so terrible we don't want to be fully present when they happen, which anyone who's ever heard, like, like rape victims and stuff, a lot of them have talked about this kind of behavior because they don't want to be present for the awful thing going on. So they will essentially, they'll kind of dissociate or whatever. But
this is that rabbit example.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the immobilized response is a key part of the biological defense, but it is ideally designed to be short term, much like you were just saying, using that rabbit example. Short term meaning I'm already in the mouth of the fox. I'm a goner, basically. So why suffer type of a thing.
Yeah.
But it says either the metabolic shutdown preserves the organism, the rabbit gets away, or the organism dies and the fox eats the rabbit. But if the threat continues indefinitely and there's no way to fight or flee, the immobilization response continues. And since the response also changes brain activity, it impacts how people's emotions and their ability to solve problems. People feel like they can't get moving physically or mentally. They feel hopeless and helpless. That's depression. And that paragraph, when I read it, I was like, holy, yes, this is it.
And I think it's a great example of like where you're constantly in this state.
Yes. And your brain changes over time in that you don't see anything except the danger over time. And that's where the distorted thinking part of this can really come in, really comes back into it, because you've seen danger no matter what it is. Your brain has assessed the situation as dangerous or not good for you, however you want to word it. And you've gone through these responses. And if you get to the immobilization stage, which a lot of us who have depression have, to where it's really hard, and you've probably, if you know anybody with depression, they've talked about how it's like having a weight on your chest and trying to get up every day. Or maybe not every day, but a lot of days. So, that's when you get into that last stage of the immobilization, to where it really does become hopeless because your brain doesn't see any, it can't get up. Like you physically just don't have either the strength, the willpower, however you want to word it, you can't. And I know it's hard for so many people to understand, because physically they just go, well, just get up. There isn't a weight on you. Just get up. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, my body will not get up. There's just some days where it's like, no. I've talked on here, they're my nope days, where I'm just like, nope. And, the best I can hope for on those days is, taking my medicine and, hopefully eating, the self-care.
Yeah, and one thing I'm also reminded of is we talked about this with regard to, it was mostly about anxiety, but also it tied into cognitive therapies and stuff. And I had brought in a story about the sounds of an airplane, and that particular podcast, we talked about the idea of that our imagination is there for a reason, to protect us.
Yeah.
That like when people think, oh, I'm just blowing this out of perspective, out of proportion. It's like, no, you're doing what you're supposed to do as a human being. When you're out in the woods and you hear a crack behind you, the fact that you start thinking of that's a bear. Yeah. It's to get you motivated.
There's a reason why you get that release of endorphins right then, is so you can be at your peak to run away.
To run. Yeah. Your fight or flight, our imagination is there for an actual reason, and that is to get us prepared to flee or fight.
Or
whatever,
Right.
But the idea being is like that even though the crack could be simply a small creature, we think it's the biggest, scariest one for a reason. And
because if we don't, if you just go, it's probably a rabbit, and then you're, bear.
And you're like, okay, I'm not ready to flee.
Well, all right. I'm not outrunning the bear, because that ain't going to happen.
Right. And I think the same thing can apply here again, is that if we're talking physiological things, all factors come into it. It's like, oh, you're just over dramatizing this. And it's like, all right, well, maybe you are, but there's also physiological reasons why sometimes we do.
Yeah.
But, why the distorted thinking isn't something that somebody sat down with us and said, learn to process life through this list and do it all wrong.
Well, I mean, technically,
sometimes
they have, but not that directly. Yeah.
But there's a lot of parts of it that is part of us just being human.
Totally. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just, and I think that's where it comes down to. I think that's where therapy does help a lot, and where it helped me is realizing when Heno hikes down a trail, sees a snake, fear, reasonable.
Yeah, right.
Heno won't walk out of the house because of something, because I had too much anxiety because I can't buy a house.
Yeah.
Because my house hasn't closed, so I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
Okay, that's some sort of a self-centered. That's a different fear.
Yeah,
I'm afraid of losing some, of not getting something that I desire.
Well, what you need at that point is that's where the therapy helps you recognize that it's similar to like my therapist told me about, like when I talked about my fear of being in cars, and she's like, if you feel that anxiety, she's like, try to put yourself through the am I in danger now?
Yeah.
Like literally, like, am I about to get T-boned? Am I, if you're just in the vehicle, yes, statistically something could happen to you, but you are technically not in danger. Direct or immediate danger. And that's more what they're looking for. And it's like, if the answer is no, then it's kind of like, or like you were just saying, it's like you start asking yourself the questions, why are you afraid in that scenario? So that hopefully the next time you go through a similar scenario, your brain has been kind of rewired to not go immediately to panic, to go, okay, this, a great example is still using you. This last go round with your finances. Remember, you got that loan. You were super excited about it. You were nervous, but it wasn't like you described the other. And once it happened, you were, like it was a different, you were different going through it this time because your brain wasn't the same way it was back then, so we need that readjustment. And that's why I'm such an advocate generally for therapy is I don't know how many times when I'm just in there, I'll ask questions like, hey, I had this response to something.
Yeah.
Does that seem, and not normal, but does that seem justified? Doesn't seem like the right word either, but
well, it's about was it a reasonable response?
That's the word I was looking for. Is reasonable.
Was I the right size?
Yeah, and that
situation
makes such a difference. Sometimes is that little check, because there's times where she has said, "No, probably not. Let's visit what was going on," or she won't say no necessarily. She'll just be kind of dig into, well, let's find out why you felt that way. And then let's see if basically that's what it is. You unpack it and go, okay, well, here's the core reason. You can see that this is not reasonable at this point. Usually once you start unpacking stuff, the way therapy works a lot of times for me anyway, is most of the time it's like we start unpacking stuff and then I'm like, oh yeah, here's this, that's kind of how it should work. And Jeannie talked about that with us a few weeks ago when she was on is, and that makes a big difference there.
That was the whole thing with that airplane scenario. It's like, okay, these are the sounds. We're going to explain whatever, what was that sound? Okay, this is what that is. That's the compressor shutting off. When everything is explained, and that's part of that cognitive therapy of learning, it's like, okay, this is, I can tell you exactly what this is, so you no longer have to fear it.
Right. Yeah. It's different if it's something to where something makes a noise and they're like, I don't know what that was, then it's like, oh, but when it's stuff that they know, it can make a huge difference. And the best part is that, 10 of the noises that you'll hear in an airplane, they're going to be able to explain. Probably most of the time, they'll probably be able to explain all 10 of them. You know, the others are the anomaly. And again, you have to be very careful ever basing your behaviors on an extreme. You know, there's a reason why in a lot of math type things, they'll knock off the high and the low extreme, you know, because that gives you a reasonable look at things. I do that if I look at like how much something's sold for on eBay. A lot of times, if there's some crazy price at the top, I'll knock that off, but I'll also knock off some of the low ones that are crazy the other way, you know, because it's like, okay, that's not even close to what most of these are doing, so I'm going to disregard that one because maybe they put it as an auction versus fixed price or whatever, you know. So you can do that sometimes too. I think in life that's kind of a thing, much like we've talked, you know, living in any extreme is bad news. You know, you don't want to live in depression. You don't want to live in mania. You know, you would like to find a nice balance in the middle to where you have energy, but you're not, you know, running around for hours on end without stopping, you know. I like that this says, you know, it mentions about, what was it? Shoot, where'd it go? I forgot. Oh, here we go. It says eventually as modern triggers last long enough, the body decides it can't get away. And, you know, it says next comes immobilization, which the body triggers to defend us. According to Porges, what we call depression is the cluster of emotional and cognitive symptoms that sits on top of a physiological platform in the immobilization response. It's a strategy meant to help us survive. The body is trying to save us. Depression happens for a fundamentally good reason. It says, and that changes everything. When people who are depressed learn that they are not damaged, but have a good biological system that is trying to help them survive, they begin to see themselves differently. After all, depression is notorious for the feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. But if depression is an active defense strategy, people may recognize that they are not quite so helpless as they thought. And I think that's a really, really important thing to see. Yeah. Is that there's so many things that I don't know how to word this better than in like sports. A really aggressive offense is generally seen as a good thing, right? But you generally don't want too aggressive of a defense a lot of times, because then you can, like in football, you can miss tackles if you're too aggressive. You can, you know, mistakes can happen if you're too aggressive. You still want to be controlled. And I think in this scenario, for the longest time, what happens is if you go, oh, you have depression, you need to be more controlled, essentially, because your body's not right. And in the other side of it, it's like, well, my body's aggressive. What I need is help determining what is actually a danger and what isn't.
Yeah.
Because using what they're saying here, think about it. If you assess someone as having this situation and you go in with, okay, the strategy is going to be, let's help them assess what is really a danger to them and what is ignorable type things. And the person grasps that and buys into it, that's going to make a massive difference, because your brain's not going to be, you know, you're not going to always go into fight or flight then, because like you said, you know, you're out on a path and you see a snake. Reasonable response is, oh, whoa, I should probably stay clear of that, right? But if you're just outside, you know, if you're walking through your house and you see, I don't know, I don't even know what, I can't think of something to describe this or to compare this with, but, you know, if you see something that isn't reasonable as far as something to be afraid of, it's one of those things. You know, we go to like COVID, right? Yes, there is a danger out there. Absolutely a danger of going out, hanging out in public, all this kind of stuff. But there's also a level of it to where you have to be careful that it doesn't immobilize you. You know, and that's where I've struggled with, because I have issues with like agoraphobia to begin with. So when you mush the two together, it makes it even harder for me to want to leave my house. But when your fear becomes paralysis, you know, it's one of those situations where learning what is a reasonable risk right now versus unreasonable risk makes the world of difference for people right now, because there are still people out there that literally are afraid of everything because they don't know what is air quote safe right now. You know, so it's one of those situations where it makes sense that people would be like, you know what, I'm just not going to go anywhere. I'm not doing anything. You know, and it's hard to really fault that, because whatever. But if things were to return to normal, those people, because of this time, they might be more likely to be afraid of things down the road, because they're heightened awareness right now. So people need to make sure that they can understand and assess the risks accordingly, instead of everything being a risk. You know, so that's where, again, like you said earlier, that's where therapy can help you kind of, you know, you just need somebody standing outside the situation to kind of go, no, not on that. Okay, yes, that. Yeah, snake, yes. Bear, oh yeah, definitely. You know, hose outside your house, just be careful, but you can walk around it, you know, like, you know, whatever it is. So the next part of this is the last part. It says shifting out of immobilization. It says if depression's the emotional expression of the immobilization response, then the solution is to move out of that state of defense. Porges believes it is not enough to simply remove the threat. Rather, the nervous system has to detect robust signals of safety to bring the social state back online. The best way to do that? Social connection. Yeah. Which makes sense, right? There's a reason why you see herd mentality. Elephants move together. If there's danger to the young, they circle around the young, you know? So, but a lot of animals, if they see like a pack of their pack moving somewhere, they assume it's safe. If you see one off by itself, you know, you don't see that a lot, because they go, that's dangerous. That's a good way to get hit by a predator or whatever. So, you know, it's, I think, similar in humans, where there's a lot of things like right now, if everybody was staying home and you were that one person who went out, you might be like, this might not be right. It says one of the symptoms of depression is shame, a sense of having let other people down or being unworthy to be with them. When people are told that depression is an aberration, we are telling them they are not part of the tribe. They are not right. They don't belong. That's when their shame deepens and they avoid social connection. We've cut them off from the path that leads them out of depression. It's time that we start honoring the courage and strength of depressed people. It's time we start valuing the incredible capacity of our biology to find a way in hard times. And it is time that we stop pretending depressed people are any different than anyone else.
It's a great message.
Yeah. And I told Penno before we started recording this, I really liked this because it comes at depression differently than like you said, the stigma of, well, there's something wrong with you. And even though people will tell you you're not alone, you know, this is common, this happens a lot, but it's like, yeah, but basically what you're telling me is I belong on the island of misfit toys, you know, and not with everybody else, or I'm Rudolph. So I've got to figure out, you know, how to trick Santa into letting me guide his sleigh or whatever. So, you know, it's not helpful a lot of times. It is, because learning that you're not alone definitely helps, because like anything, you know, as humans, we generally want to fit in. We want to belong to a tribe of some sort. But at the same time, it kind of inadvertently still can kind of push the stigma of that you're a part, you know, you're in the defective camp, you know, you don't belong over in the normal camp, you know, and that's part of why I grew to hate the word normal, because it really felt like, you know, using the Harry Potter thing, like the concept of calling someone a muggle, you know, type of a thing because they're normal or whatever. It's like, it's different in that aspect in that I'm special and you're nothing, but, or Magneto calling, mutants homo superiors,
Yeah.
But it's just, I've hated people calling, oh, well, blah, blah, you're not normal. It's like, well, you don't have to put it that way. Like, you could just not do that. Like we were talking earlier, you could have just, I don't know, kept your mouth shut. But I like that this is very much hey, we all have this. Yours is just a little more active than everybody else's. Versus going, you're one of a few that have this. You go, everyone has this. Yours is just active. I like that mentality of being inclusive versus exclusive so much better because I think that message works so much better for people. Because there are so many people with depression that are literally going to sit and sing the song Hermes sings about being a misfit, I keep going back to that, but it's so accurate, like that's literally what's like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I be normal? Why can't I, and it's like, yeah, let's try to remove that from people, okay. Yeah. My fight or flight is, a little too aggressive. My imagination's a little too aggressive, but hey, that happens. Everyone's imagination and fight or flight are too aggressive at some point.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe me, don't believe me, go into a real dark basement by yourself. And how many people are like, oh, I ain't afraid of the dark. I'm not afraid of this. But they don't want to go in the basement by themselves with no lights on. Or dim lighting, you know what I mean? Because we've all seen enough horror movies that's a bad idea. And our imagination gets the best of us, right? It's, so... it's one of those, like I said, I'm all for the inclusive versus exclusive approach. Even I don't know for sure if I full on buy into this or not. I don't know. And again, we're not doctors, therapists, trained professionals. So, please though, talk to someone if you need to. Because even with this, like you said, Heno, the question ultimately is,
yep.
What now?
What?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good article.
Yeah, I thought so too. This was a good one. This was from Psychology Today, and I don't know how to say this woman's name, but it looks like Alison Escalante, I'm guessing, MD.
Yeah, it seemed like it.
So I will have a link to this the article in the show notes, of course, and, please go read the whole thing, because I did skip a few parts of it, but it's a really, really well-written piece, I think. Aside from that one example, which I still feel like they could have found a better example, but whatever. So yeah, there you go. So I guess we're at the part of the show where Jen tells you to head on over to our website. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please head on over to our website, which can be found at, I don't remember because I didn't pull up the email first. I know it's the crazylifepodcast.weebly.com. There we go. And you can email us at thecrazylifepodcast@outlook.com. You can find Jen on Twitter at Jen's Crazy Life, and that's Jen with a G. You can also find her on Shaking the Sheets, which is a pop culture talk podcast with her co-host Nate. And did I forget something else before she throws it to you, Heno?
Oh, I don't know.
All right. Well, anyway, how can they find you, Heno?
You can find me on Twitter at Ida Heno, and you can find me on Facebook Messenger, Heno Heiter, and on Instagram, where I put my new hat of the day for this week up. And, our new Movie the Needle podcast came out last week. Our Boughs of Folly.
Oh, yeah.
Our most hated Christmas songs. It was really fun. It was great. It was funny. I got a lot of good outtakes too.
Awesome.
So
I haven't had a chance to listen yet. Yeah, I will soon here. I haven't had a chance yet. Darn it. So awesome. Well, cool. You can find this show on Twitter at The Crazy Life Pod, where I post when new episodes go up. You can find me on Twitter at Stu Nami. you can find my other podcast at Salty Language. I'm so fried. I don't know why. I have no reason to be. At Salty_language on Twitter or at saltylanguage.com. That show is not safe for work, and it's just me and my best friend talking about just weird news, pop culture, stuff that happens in our life, that kind of stuff. So please go give it a listen. And we're part of the Tangent Bound Network, which can be found at tangentboundnetwork.com. And you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/crazylifepodcast. And again, if you need help, please reach out to someone. You're not alone, but you're not weird. You're not broken. You're not all this other garbage that people want to tell us. We're just, we just have overactive fight or flight responses. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this a lot better, actually. It does. Yeah. It is interesting, all kidding aside, it does feel so much more positive to approach it more from that angle. Yeah. It really does. Yeah. But anyway, like I said, again, all joking aside, if you need help, please reach out. Just the reframing that therapy can give, or that I've heard people get from going to groups or that kind of thing, it can make such a difference. It can really lift a lot of weight off of your shoulders. So please try to get some help. Just use all the tools in the tool belt, kind of a situation. And of course, not just because it's this time of year or whatever, but please be kind to one another. Please exercise kindness when you can. I know I yelled at a lady, but she shouldn't have stole that other person's smile, so whatever. I'm the weirdest Avenger, You know what it is? No, forget being an Avenger. I'm I'm one of the X-Men, because my power is to pull that. Are you familiar with the character Bishop in X-Men?
No.
No? Okay. Bishop basically can absorb energy and rechannel it. So that's basically what I was doing.
You could be part of, what was the one with Ben Stiller where his superpower was being angry?
Oh, Mystery Men. Yeah.
Mystery Men. You remember the Mystery Men?
Yeah. Was it Mr. Furious, I think was his.
Yeah, something like Mr. Furious.
I'm a ticking time bomb of fury. Yeah. I love that movie. That's such a good movie.
It's such a great movie. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, but practice kindness to one another, because a perfect example again is the guy that talked with me at the grocery store. Totally diffused me in that moment and has no idea that he even did it.
Yep.
Just had a nice back and forth with him, and he walked away and I walked away, and that was it. But it was a nice situation. So, you never know when you can make that kind of difference, where maybe you could diffuse somebody in a situation or whatever, or just brighten their day or whatever. So please be kind. And happy holidays to everybody, because this is our last one before Christmas. We should have one more before the end of the year. But happy holidays no matter what, and stay safe, and don't drink too much spiked eggnog. All right, Henno, what do you got to say?
If at first you don't succeed, fix your ponytail or man bun and try again.